stopped it when COVID thing started, and we were back in person, we stopped it. Where
It's not worth the risk.
no, at all.
See what you want, you have good ideas. Yes, sir.
I've never seen so many people except for those few times and we are.
Yeah, I got that. With all that light behind me, I can't, in all cases, see who it is I'm looking at either, so. All right, let's, we're a minute early, but let's go ahead and convene our town council meeting. And so I'll call this to order, and let's start with the approval of minutes. We have the minutes of the November 3rd town council meeting. And do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Second. Any comments? Any comments, changes, edits?
No.
Nothing? Okay.
No, Mayor.
None? All right, with that, everybody ask for a vote to approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Got a lot of paper today. I am going to, if I can, defer the mayor's update to the end of the meeting, and that's predominantly because we do potentially have a fairly long agenda, and I want to make sure we get through everything, and I don't want to use up 10 or 15 minutes, but there are some things I'm going to want to bring you up to speed with, specifically to do with the roads project, our Bobcat and SGA issue, and COVID, and 3 or 4 other things. But just so we make sure we get through all the rest of the meeting, I'm going to take the liberty of deferring my comments towards the end. So with that, let me go to citizens' comments. As everybody knows, we have 2 sets of citizens' comments, one at the beginning and one at the end. The citizens' comments at the beginning are for anybody who has a comment on something that's related to an actual agenda item. And it's been months since we've had anybody with citizens' comments, so. Anybody? Great. Just come on up and tell us your name and address. And this is the most normal meeting we've had in months. How you doing? Thanks.
Can I, so you can hear me?
Yep.
Hey, I'm Miller Harper. I'm with East West Partners. We are the development company who purchased Lot 2 over at Parcel 13. Specifically, we just wanted to comment on new business item A, which is, I think, related to the, make sure that's the right agenda item. Yeah. Related to the adoption of the flood maps as the more restrictive of the 2004 to 2021 flood maps. We were just notified of this Wednesday late afternoon, right before Thanksgiving, and we're trying to understand exactly what it means, because it does have implications to our property. You know, in short, if it's related to height and where you start building from, we're not as concerned about that. We understand that there's concerns around on height throughout the island. Our concern more is, is the intent of this ordinance to change the flood zone classification as it relates to insurance requirements, as it relates to construction means and methods, because those 2 things could be drastically changed by going from one flood zone category to another flood zone category. We would hope to sit down, and we obviously meet with town staff often we would hope to sit down and understand the intent. We've been working on the design of this project for multiple months, actually almost 2 years now, and are just trying to make sure we understand the implications, because it does affect our strategy and our design and as we near completion of our design efforts. So would ask the town to defer and give us and the other, we've reached out to other folks in town, and it doesn't, to my knowledge, I'm not sure if there's been too much of an opportunity for property owners and citizens to comment on this, or to at least understand the intent. So that was our hope.
All right, and so I can address a little bit of that for you. So when we get, because it is a rather esoteric discussion, so when we get to that item, is Bruce going to give an overview? Well, he will be by the time we get there. So we are going to have some discussion. So I think that will help a little bit answer some of your questions about what we're doing and why and what the impact is. I will tell you the ARB and some builders and architects of new homes have been primarily the driver of this. And then lastly, I would point out, this is an ordinance change like this takes 2 readings.
Right.
So this is the first reading. We have the ability to make changes. So I wouldn't be concerned if we ultimately approve it on first reading today. I don't think you should be, the world hasn't come to an end. You're still going to have a month that you have the ability to sit down with the town staff, understand what's going on, for us to hear any impact that it might have, and still have, before second reading, a chance to impact that. So there'll be opportunities to
I appreciate that and understand. I guess the concern with being in between 2 readings is it leaves us a little bit unclear on what strategy we need to be focused on.
And we can spend the time.
So,
but
okay.
Otherwise, we have to counter, because the maps have to be, we're working on a timetable to get this done by the end of January.
Understand.
Any other citizens' comments related to things on the agenda? Sure, come on.
Good afternoon. My name is Luke Farrell. I live at 101 Golden Eye. I want to comment on the same ordinance, new business A, I guess. First, I want to say thank you to Mr. Weaver and thank you to Ms. Tillerson for helping me understand what the ordinance meant and kind of the subtleties of it. I'm speaking about just 2 things. One, reinforcing that I'm very happy to see that it does not have to do with anything to do with remodeling. I think that, as we discussed, there's a lot of need for remodeling on the island, and for the ordinance not to be restrictive. This is a little bit less restrictive, allowing the new flood maps to be identified and used. I think that's very appropriate, and it's going to help the island overall, the whole complexion of the island. Number 2, with respect to the ordinance specifically and what it does restrict, I find it interesting that there's 2 federal agencies that weighed in and said that we could lower the flood levels even for new construction, and we're choosing to stay effectively with the old flood levels. I find that interesting because I think the qualifications and the standards by the Federal Emergency Management Administration and FIRM, the National Insurance Regulatory Body, I think they've got great resources, and for us to second guess those resources, at least completely wipe them out, is interesting, I guess I'll say. I think if the ordinance was more in the direction of lowering it even for new construction, it still gives people the option to build as high as they want to above the floodplain. But basically this ordinance is counteracting everything that the new ordinance, the new flood maps put in place. So I just would have that comment that it's interesting, even though it doesn't affect renovations. So again, thank you, and Ms. Tillerson, thank you for your help.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any other, yes? Andy.
Unmasked. Good afternoon. I'm Andy Capelli, 160 Governor's Drive. I'd like to call your attention to something you'll be dealing with on the agenda item for the preventative management plan that's been submitted. And specifically on page 25, 26, there's a discussion about ways of implementing and documents that are being used to to follow up on some of the items that are being proposed. Specifically, the beach and dune system discussion suggests and points out, appropriately so in my mind, that the town's beach management plan can provide a basis for defining thresholds. And I agree with that, and I think that gives you a vehicle to collectively put in one place all of the issues related to the beach management and flooding related to the beach and dunes. But it goes on to say in the salt marsh areas, basically nothing about a vehicle to use to implement and monitor the thresholds. That's notwithstanding a lot of the discussion we had in some of the work groups that talked about specifically a dune management plan, similar to a beach management plan. That, in my mind, would be the vehicle that needs to be in place now so that these thresholds can be added to it and then monitored and used to manage the marsh management plan. The plan itself represents, in effect, the second leg, if you will, of the table. The third being the flood management plan, which KIC would have. I find it interesting that the the marsh management plan was not even focused on, since it's already encompassed in the town's comprehensive plan. It's one of the steps that's called for in the comprehensive plan, but yet the task force report doesn't even conclude that that would be a vehicle or any useful purpose in supporting their marsh management goals. So I just want to bring that to your attention, but otherwise I think the report was well done and comprehensive, and hopefully we'll see long before 2022 some effective implementation of the plan and useful tracking of some of the needs. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Andy.
And I'll be interested, I hope you stay around for the discussion. Lee is here today, who is going to talk about the next phases of our marsh plan, marsh research that's being done with the Conservancy. So hopefully that will start to address the question that you're raising about the marsh aspect of that. But
As long as we don't get to the time limit. Thank you.
all right, any other citizens' comments? All right, hearing none, we're going to move to our presentations, and we have one that I've been looking forward to for some time, which is the Sea Level Resiliency Adaptive Management Report. And we have Lucas and Kathy, Lucas Hernandez, Kathy Pumphrey, who are part of, do we have any other team members here?
Yes, I'm going to cover that.
Okay.
Diana Mesnot and Dave Pumphrey.
Okay. And so they have been working on this effort for not quite a year. And it's been very difficult because if you saw, the original plan was pre-COVID, and they then had to jump through a lot of different hoops to figure out how to run focus groups and create a mechanism for getting property owner input in this era of COVID. And I think they've done a great job. This is a presentation. We're not looking for the town council, this town council, to take any action as a result of this presentation today, but it is something that I hope that the next town council, I strongly believe, has to be one of their top priorities to really step back and take the original report of the subcommittee a couple of years ago and this report, and beginning to put the two together and start to talk about what that means in terms of future actions. So I think this is important, and I look forward to you giving everybody a sense of the key takeaways.
We plan to do that today. So Lucas and I are going to do the primary presentation, and again, other task force members in the room: Dave Pumphrey, Diana Mesnot, John Taylor. Lee Brundrick, who sat in on a lot of our meetings, was not a member of the task force, but very active in it. So,
and just so we stay close to expectations, about how long do you think you will be presenting?
we timed it down. We were
15,
doing
okay.
really well. It
Okay.
depends how many questions you ask and how detailed you get. I wanted to say, to start out with, we were very pleased when we heard the candidates night, and all of the candidates spoke to an adaptive management plan, which the task force was just thrilled about. Here we were, not even doing our presentation yet, and everybody had the language down. This was a good thing. Go ahead, next slide. So the key takeaways, we'll hit the bottom line first of all and then tell you how we got there. So what we saw in the report and in our survey and in our interviews was there was a high level of concern and interest within the Kiowa community about the impacts of sea level rise, climate change, and flooding on the island. The second key takeaway for you is that the town and Kika should develop a full functioning AMP to ensure that that's institutionalized on behalf of the Kiowa community. Next slide. So just a little reminder, the task force was actually established in July of 2020. We've been meeting weekly. I don't know what we're going to do now on Friday afternoons when we don't have our Zoom calls. This next step was based on the recommendation from the 2018 Sea Level Rise Report by the town's environmental subcommittee. So there is a connection with the work that we did and what that subcommittee started. Our primary goal was to initiate the development of an adaptive management plan to assist Kiowa in addressing the impacts of sea level rise, climate change, and flooding. I know you've seen this diagram before, you probably are sick of it, but I want to describe and highlight a few things. I'm not going to go through everything on this. I'm hoping that you've read the report and seen this. The key takeaways from this are that in the diagram, you'll notice that there are some key points: thresholds, trigger points, monitoring program, and response plan. Those things are actually interrelated and make up the adaptive management plan. Some of these are developed by the community, which is where we started, and a lot of these are developed by technical staff, consultants, and the staff of the town of Kiowa and Kika. Next. So the objectives of phase one, which is what we just completed, was threshold identification. Our goals were to solicit community views on the quality of life that form the basis for a plan for Kiowa Island. Assess the point at which the quality of life, economic viability, infrastructure, or aspirations of Kiowa are negatively impacted by an undesirable, unacceptable condition. This is basically the definition of a threshold. And to educate the community about the impact of sea level rise and flooding on Kiowa Island. So what did we do in the first phase was primarily community engagement. I really love that part of it. We did virtual focus groups to develop the threshold areas. We did a community survey to assess the level of concern. We did interviews and surveys with key stakeholders to identify key concerns, and we provided background information to support community education to participants. And in the report, you would see the listing of those reports and the information that's contained there.
Thank you, Kathy. So now we'll sort of move back into, again, the results from the study. All in all, we had 1,564 respondents to that survey. This was about 17% of the total population that we had polled. We sent it out to about 9,200 originally. And again, this reflected a broad range of demographics on the island. So we looked at location, property type, time spent on the island, residency status, and then we made sure that those carried over into the original focus groups that helped to develop the questions for the survey. One of the key findings that we had found was that there was a significant concern about the overall risk to quality of life on the island from sea level rise, climate change, and flooding. So again, the highest level of concern items here. So these next few slides are those main results from this study again. Sea level rise, climate change, and flooding on Kiowa's natural environment was at the top of the list. That would be beaches, dunes, salt marshes, maritime forest, and just overall vegetation on the island. Infrastructure, to no surprise, was another big point that everyone had concerns about. And again, that would be your utilities, your road access, and then access to amenities. Flooding on personal property, again, another one that was a top concern from the community. And then you see at this very last point on the slide that we mentioned the minimal differentiation between the concern of quality of life items. Overall, when we took these graphs, I think there's over 50 in the report. We went back and ran a multiple regression to compare them to each other to see if there was a statistical significance in the difference between the items. So was someone more concerned about beaches or dunes compared to utility services? And we could not prove that significant at all. What that means to me is that it's very hard to rank these items. They are all of equal importance. So here's the first of a couple representative graphs that we wanted to include in today's presentation. What you really want to pay attention to here are those left and right bars in each of the sections. Those are the extreme concern and moderate concern levels of concern. Now, when we had originally put these graphs together, we had noticed that breaking them down by demographic was a much better way to view the information. So here we've got concern about long-term impacts to your quality of life compared to your years on the island. And then later on, you'll see that years on the island, so amount of time spent and the amount of time you've lived on the island, play a big factor in your level of concern overall. Here, across the board, no matter how long you've lived on the island, whether it be 2 years or more than 20, you have a high level of concern for your quality of life. Again, here's one where we looked at, have you been personally impacted by flooding versus your time spent on Kiowa? And you can see that trend again. Your blues are the yeses and your yellows are the no's. So until you get to that 20-year mark, your no's are higher, which we found to be interesting. And again, we split that further down by, do you live near the marsh? Do you live near the beach? And those reveal some different information as you dig. Here again is one of those trends that I was talking about. So this is damage to your own private property versus time spent on the island. Again, here, if you're here more than 9 months, that's the graphs on the very far right-hand side. The level of concern is extremely high there. So that trend again. And then finally, we wanted to wrap this one up with beach erosion. So as Mr. Capelli was mentioning earlier, this was across the board of high concern. And what we split it by here was per location of your property on the island. So no matter if you live near a pond or the ocean or the marsh, erosion of the beach is important to you. So what were the key threshold themes that we pulled? We heard this throughout our focus group meetings, that the holistic package of Kiowa is what originally brought property owners to the island. So it's not just the beach and the dunes and the marsh, and it's not just the amenities, it's all of those things combined that make people want to live here. And then unacceptable situations on Kiowa are determined not just by the severity and duration of an event or a situation, but also how far or how often it occurs. So those are the key elements that we uncovered throughout this process as a need to develop these thresholds. So at this point in the process, I think we have threshold areas, but we don't necessarily have the thresholds that we need that are measurable, that are strict numbers that we can provide to use into the monitoring program later on. So with that being said, again, we've got the need for these threshold areas to have a duration and frequency indicator associated with them. I think that we are well on our way with several of these, but in this slide, we've split them between the natural and the built environment. So flooding and its impact on roads, on utilities, on properties, and on access to amenities. Those were our big items that need more investigation. In regard to the natural environment, we've got the beach and the dune system that we've already talked about. The town's beach management plan is very robust. More than likely has the numbers that we may need to develop these thresholds and be done with, say, that step. the salt marsh, maritime forest, and then again, vegetation. All of these items were highly rated of concern, and all of them, I think, to some degree have been touched on by either KICA, the town, or the Conservancy at this point in time.
So we're at the point where we want to talk a little bit about what the next steps are and the recommendations. So obviously, the task force strongly believes that the town and KICA should develop a fully functioning adaptive management plan and recognize that this is a joint venture, that all of the entities on Kiowa need to participate to make that successful. We also are recommending completing phase 1. We fell just short of that because we don't have duration, frequency, and other indicators on our threshold statements in those 8 areas that we mentioned. And then complete phases 2 through 4. You'll notice in Appendix A in the report lists the various steps and the things that are involved in these. I'm not going to go into those details today. Next. And then there are 4 more recommendations that are related to this that support the development of an AMP. These things are community education, and we've talked a lot about that. An annual report that's issued by the resilience specialist. An annual survey that updates people's perception in the community and their concern about sea level rise, climate change, and flooding. And then research or continuing to collect information in those areas that we maybe today don't know enough about.
Now on this slide, I really just wanted to highlight how this information will be used. First bullet is identifying what concerns need more attention. So at this point, I think the conversation needs to develop between the 3 entities that were discussed at length in the report to determine what information is available and can it be shared in this one centralized location for the monitoring plan portion of the adaptive management plan. Additionally, in regard to that annual report, it's communicating the areas that we already monitor heavily. For me, that would be infrastructure and private property. We gather flood reports all of the time. I receive them on a daily basis when it rains like it did yesterday. I get quite a few reports. So items like that, when you compare them with things like the tide gauge that the town has in place, you can make some really great assumptions, and you can also make some good judgments of what tide level, what rainfall amount relates to the flooding that I received information on that day. And it also makes understanding links between those parameters a lot more obvious. So essentially what you may see as a issue that's purely infrastructural, the fix maybe could be in the marsh. Maybe it's with the marsh management plan. So I think it really helps uncover what these interweaving sort of items that create flooding or create an issue for us, how do they develop, and how do we measure them, and how do we track them? And then I think the next step is prioritizing research and monitoring on those undercovered areas. And then finally, of course, developing that adaptive management plan with these results from the community survey. So with that, we've got a little image here with all of the key items that were concerns from the community.
Well, I'll open it up here to any questions from the council members. I just want to say, from my perspective, one of the things that I had hoped, and I think we got from this, is, when we did the task force subcommittee a couple years ago, I thought that the important, while there were millions of detailed or a lot of detailed recommendations, to me the takeaways from that were always that they made a good and effective case that sea level rise was in fact a real legitimate issue and one that was in fact important. But at the same time, I always felt that the committee made it clear that it wasn't a crisis, that in fact the right approach was one that understood the places where we needed to have urgency, and at the same time take a more measured and thoughtful approach in those cases where urgency wasn't required. And to also recognize, though, that we did need to continue to keep our focus. This is the easiest can in the world to kick down the road. And, but what had always concerned me is that we've essentially been lecturing to our residents. We've been telling them what the experts are telling us, and not necessarily knowing whether our property owners were in the same place. Now, I might be kidding myself, but at least what I took away from this in the results is that our property owners are pretty much in the same place. They, you know, you saw yeses and nos, and it's a big issue, not a big issue, but I read into this the same sort of that they were very much in sync in terms of, yes, it's an important issue. No, they're not freaking out. It's not, you know, they're not expecting KICA or the town to run out and spend millions of dollars. But at the same time, if we are not focused on this, we would be doing the community a great disservice. I don't know if you saw it that way. That's what I took from it, and I hope that helps future KICA boards and future town councils who are trying to decide, do I focus on this or focus on that? Do I spend money here or spend money there? That this is something that is supported. That's my takeaway. But I'm interested, at the end of the day, in this room are the people who will be very likely most of the next town council, and we got a few in the audience. So I would ask you any questions that you have of them, and I would ask the question also, so from your perspective, what would you be most wanting to see and asking from the next town council?
I would think that the obvious next step for us is finishing phase one. We need those sort of ending items for the threshold. So that would be those frequencies, the durations, and then how do we get those? I think it's fairly easy in my mind. I think that the conversations just need to happen between the town, KICA, and then the Conservancy with the projects that they're working on, the marsh vulnerability study and the groundwater study. At that point, I think that all of those results need to go back out to the community. I think that to that end, you know, like you had mentioned before, we're letting the professionals go in, create these numbers, but I still think that they need to go back to the community for them to approve. We don't want to have this miscommunication again between what the professionals are doing and what the community believes are those actual threshold definitions. After that, I think the logical next step is the monitoring program. So my request would be to finish up phase one, to share those results once the community sends their feedback, and then to progress into that monitoring program phase.
Help me understand when you say you want to finish that. I understand it. What resources do you need to finish that from the town? What is it that we need to make sure we knock down in terms of hurdles?
Just communication with Jim Jordan so that we can understand better how renourishment on the beach works. What are the values that they use for when wiping dunes away before they go in and renourish? Those are threshold values for the beach and the dune system, in my mind. For the marsh vulnerability study, same sort of thing. So where are we accreting in those riverine areas in the marsh? Where are we eroding? I think all of those factors kind of play into the marsh side of this deal.
Has there been resistance to providing that information?
No, it just hasn't been requested yet.
Okay, so you're requesting it.
Yes.
It comes from you. Okay.
So it would just be an open line of communication, and then I think the logical next step would be to enter that monitoring program once the thresholds are actually defined and approved by the community and by you all.
And you would want that finished by when?
3 months.
Probably within a 3-month time frame. At least threshold,
Any issues? No issues. Okay.
at least the threshold definition
Can
portion.
I add one more thing? Just to be really clear, you know, we have the technical expert here. So what this means to us in the community is numbers. How frequently, like is it 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 feet? Does it happen 5 days a week, 6 days a month? You know, that's the kind of specificity that we really need, and then we need to validate that in the community that indeed that is their concern. We know they're concerned, but how do these various levels of concern, or feet of water or flooding, affect their perception of the problem?
But you believe that data exists, is that correct?
We believe that, based on the information we got already from the focus groups and the survey, that the information, those specific things should be easy, an easy next step. In fact, yes, we did have some of that articulated. It did not go into the survey, so we couldn't measure it, but we need to do that piece as well.
And again, excuse me if I'm a little dense on this, but I'm just trying to understand, you believe the data exists and the town possesses it?
The town and Kika.
For portions.
Yes.
For some of these areas. I think we've got a pretty good grasp on Kika's end for a lot of the infrastructure.
Okay, but there's no barriers or anything stopping you
No.
from getting, no one's
No, sir.
resisting you in any way?
No,
No, we just haven't pulled it together.
I just wanna make sure that there's no hurdle here that you're asking us to knock down.
no,
Okay.
not at all.
I have a comment. I think your interactivity is very critical to this, because you're right. People, the average citizen, is not gonna be able to understand, is 2 inches of water a critical variable or not?
Right.
But if you go back to them and say, here's our proposal kind of thought, they can evaluate and say, yeah, I can live with that, or no, I can't. So
Right.
that's the challenge will be to keep it simple
Right.
in order to make it effective, right?
Yep.
That's what we had run into with the focus groups originally,
Right.
is that, you know, how do you quantify a physical number, right? It's all what you see in front of you. So it's percentage of marsh loss is
Right.
probably a better indicator for the general community rather than 3 foot extra water.
Yeah,
Right.
and it may be that over time, we'll get really good at this.
Mhm.
Yes.
They'll say the
Hopefully.
first time, well, I couldn't possibly tolerate not being in my house for 7 days.
Mhm.
And then in 5 years, we learned that, well, in fact, they can't tolerate it for 2 days. I don't know what the deal is, but we'll learn if we go back and forth. Yeah.
Right.
But-
With COVID, I've learned how to do it for 2
Right. We've had lots of practice.
Right.
But I do think the interactivity between the experts and, let's call it, the residents and the population in general,
Mhm.
is a very critical variable. And trying to do our best is gonna be hard to keep it simple. It's gonna be very hard. Because it'll be, if it's too complex, it loses its effectiveness.
This is why, in our recommendation, we're talking about centralizing that kind of, you know, have a repository, as Lucas talked about. Because if we don't have it centralized, what ends up happening is everybody has a piece of the pie, but it's not put together in one place for us to really evaluate it.
You're right, absolutely. Good job.
My concern would be that once you have experts, if you will, determine, you know, the data, and then you circle that back to the population and say, so what do you think of this? What you'll now get back is all those people who were very concerned, they were unanimous in being very concerned, but very concerned to them means 1 inches, 3 inches, 7 inches, 19 inches. So you're going to get a real scatter plot of responses. And I wonder how useful that's going to be. You know, I mean, put it this way, as a question, once you have determined all data for all these points, are you thinking of going back to the people on Kiowa to say, this is what it is, or saying, here's what we think, now what do you think? Because I think the second approach is not going to yield you anything,
Yeah.
other than a lot of disparate responses.
I think, you know, I agree. I think it will be a difficult sort of endeavor, but we've got ways to visualize sort of some of these informations that end up being concerns. Road flooding, for instance. I know everyone has seen those infrastructure maps that were the before and after of these projects. You can visualize the flooding in that way. Similarly, you can do that to the marsh. So if we had X amount extra of water per a storm surge or sea level rise or just a rainfall, how does that impact the marsh? Maybe the marsh is underwater more, and maybe even Lee can speak to this more. Is there a way to graphically show these things rather than just numbers. So it'll have to be, how we present the information to the community will have to be very critical.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate
you.
it, and I think this is, again, the next step in a long number of steps that are gonna take place, so.
Right.
In talking about sea level rise, I hope you guys appreciated the little project we did in front. We've raised the road 3 inches so that in the next storm, yeah. Stephanie's killing me. I gotta say, it was not the town that raised the road, okay? But,
And we only got half of it.
We only got half the road.
yeah, but we got 3 inches. All right, again, thanks very much. So let's move to old business. The first item A is to consider approval of ordinance 2020-12, which is an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2020-21 budget for the town of Key Island, South Carolina. This is a second and final reading. This was initially discussed and reviewed in Ways and Means Committee a month ago, and then approved at first reading in the November council meeting. Let me first ask for, Droda, is there anything you need or want to do on this? Well, let me get a motion first, so let me get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, at that point, I will both ask whether there are any questions or comments, and I will also ask Droda if there's any discussion or whether, it might be good for you to just summarize the 2 or 3 key changes that did occur after.
Sure. Yes, so.
After the last reading.
So as the mayor mentioned, this is a second reading, and we already discussed almost all the items but two. So the first new item, which is new on the budget amendment, but not on the, I wonder, Petra, if I move it to? No? Oh, sorry. You don't have it, hold on a second. Okay. But it was already, went through the first reading, the ordinance to set the salaries or stipend for the mayor and the council and the judge. So if, you can go to the next one too. Yeah, just. Oh, okay. So, oh, okay.
It's okay, you can just describe it.
So anyway, if that gets passed by the second reading, the salaries for the, it will result in the increase in the salaries for 14,000, and that includes 6 months of this fiscal year. I see.
Drinks?
Hey.
We're having drinks now?
The next item that is new, well, the 10,000 in benefits is the increase in the town's participation in the 401k plan. So that's $10,000 for 6 months. 100 for 100,000 for a website design as a placeholder. Almost 16,000 for the air purification system for the town hall. 16,400. This is number of a new environmental projects. 66,000 for the radios for the beach patrol and a couple for the town hall staff members. And the new item is the repayment of the general obligation bond that the town. Oh, that's it. Yeah, or one less. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. So. The general obligation bond is also on the agenda as a resolution. We're gonna ask for your approval to pay off that bond. So I can just give you a quick history about it now, so then I don't need to go back to the next item.
That would be good. And would you also, when you do that, on the slide you took off, would you just reconcile, make sure I understand where the,
Sure.
what
So
reserve accounts
I'll
it's
say it
coming
right now.
from? Yeah.
Currently, in the current budget, we budgeted for this year for the debt repayment, one pay of 333,000 plus about 50,000 on interest. So the difference of 1.6 you see there, it's only the outstanding debt.
And that's coming out of the capital fund?
Of a capital fund, yes. So that bond
in 2016, the town issued a general obligation bond to help with the construction of the town hall. It was for $3 million, and Bank of South Carolina had the most attractive rate of 1.34%. To that point, because it was such an attractive rate, it was just a good way to keep that and just pay it every year. But now with the interest rate being so low and all our our investment is invested at the short-term rent, or at the short-term rate that it currently is at 20 basis point. So we saw some opportunity to save some money, but paying it off. There is no prepayment penalty. The only thing is it has to be, the bank has to be notified with 30-day written notice that we would like to repay that. And we're proposing to do that. And save pretty much, currently our interest rate is 15 basis points.
All right,
Yes.
we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now we go to consider the approval of ordinance 2020-13, which is an ordinance to set the salaries of the mayor and council members of the town of Kiowa Island. This is also a second and final reading. It was discussed at Ways and Means Committee in November, in October, approved for first reading in November. And Stephanie, I'm going to ask you, because there has been one change, some additional language that was added to this. I would just like you to point that out for the council, but let me first ask, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Yes, you should have received via email the additional language. We were asked by Mayor Pro Tem Wydock in regards to health benefits for council members, and we wanted to make sure that by adding salaries or a stipend, we didn't create any unintended consequences by making that available. So I worked with our town attorney, Joe Wilson, and on section 1 of the ordinance, we added language in there that defines your salaries as a monthly stipend, and that in addition, it states that council members are not entitled to any employee benefits, including health insurance offered by the town to its employees. That's the only change that we made, just to clarify that and make sure that it was memorialized somewhere. So if ever in the future this changes, it will have to be changed by ordinance, which requires 2 readings. That's it.
All right. So again, and I appreciate Councilman Wydock for raising this. I think it was an unintended consequence that may have slipped through. It was never our intent to open up the town to paying health insurance and pension and so on for our council members. So I think this appropriately got us back to where we intended to be. So we have a motion, we have a second. I will remind that at the first reading, we did a call vote and it was unanimous. I won't do that now. I'll just ask, we're all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did I do?
Motion to amend, that language was not in the original.
Do we need a motion? You know, we had that conversation. You and I didn't have that conversation. Do I need to do that?
I think I would prefer that, yes, that there be a motion to amend to add that language
Okay.
in a second.
I'm fine to err. Sometimes because it's between a first and second, we've taken, but I'm more than happy to err on the side of being conservative. So let's to be conservative, let's just do this. We'll step back. What I would like then is a motion to amend ordinance 2020-13 to add the clause These salaries shall be paid as monthly stipends, and the mayor and council members are not considered employees of the town and are not entitled to any employee benefits, including health insurance offered by the town to its employees. Could I have a motion to amend with the addition of that language?
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now, so now I have a motion. Now, can I have a motion to approve ordinance 2020-13 as amended?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Did I do good?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay. We have also as old business, a discussion of the draft language for tourism committee, which is Stephanie Braswell. And again, just to set the tone or why this is on here, we have, as you all know, been exploring the potential of establishing some mechanism that would allow the town, in partnership with its basic tourism companies or industry, to be able to create a mechanism that would allow us to use some of the state accommodation tax funds that we receive every year that are otherwise forwarded to the Charleston Convention Bureau, and not all, but some potentially provide a mechanism to use those locally where it could be focused on more Kiowa-specific promotional work. What we've heard in the past is in concept, a desire to explore and move in the direction of creating a mechanism to do that. Stephanie has been taking on the role of helping think through, along with Joe, our attorney, both the legal mechanisms and what would this look like in terms of an approach. At a prior meeting, Stephanie laid out a couple different approaches. I'm not sure that we arrived at a specific one. I know that I think there are probably different opinions on that, but nonetheless, in some ways that's sort of detail. So what I want to do is just keep the discussion going so that we don't let it sit for a few months and then the new council's got to grab it. So my presumption is the new council will ultimately work from here, figure out what they want to do with it. But our intent, I think, is just to begin to give Stephanie some ongoing feedback here. So, you got it.
You summed it up perfectly.
I'm sorry. I'll never do that again.
No, it's fine. But obviously, this is just the next step in one of the more supported mechanisms, which was the internal tourism committee. So I don't know, Mayor, if you want me to go back through some of the options that I presented, or
I think it would be good for you to just summarize what you have, what you're envisioning here in terms of the membership, the size of the however it's formed, the size of the group, what the participation from what entities, what kinds of things. If you could, I just think at this point, if the committee could focus particularly, I think, on your number 3 and 4 and 5. And if they have any input and thoughts to you on that, that would be good. But if you could summarize those, I think.
You can skip 1 or 2.
Well, I think I think one and 2 kind of summarizes things we've already agreed to. So yeah.
1 and 2 has already been described. But membership would be, ideally, it would consist of 5 members for voting purposes. But it would be representatives from the Kiowa Island entities, and it would be appointed by town council. And what I see needs to be represented here is all the entities on the island. And so that would be 1 member from the town, 1 member from the community association, which I had designated as preferably the communications manager, 1 member from the golf resort, preferably the marketing director, 1 member from the Kiowa Island Real Estate, preferably their marketing director, and 1 member from Freshfields, preferably their marketing director. And then I had some optional membership appointments that would be non-voting members, but they would be maybe an additional lodging member and additional merchant to provide a little different viewpoint.
All right.
And I mean, I just see that this scope of work would be developing the tourism program, which is required for the distribution of the promotional funds. And that would look a lot like evaluating the marketing data, preparing the strategic planning, working with agencies in creation of marketing assets and campaigns, developing relations with industry partners, and evaluating the program effectiveness. And we would have to come back to town council to, at the beginning and end of fiscal year, and present what would be planned for that year, the expenditures. So that's kind of a brief, it really wasn't supposed to be comprehensive, it was really just supposed to be the next step.
Did you have a thought in there? It's sort of missing. Did you have a thought as to who the town representative would be? Are we talking about a town council member or the communications manager, or what's your thought?
My thought would be that like it'd be a restructuring of my department would be the most logical, but I also think that there needs to be some sort of town council representation.
Thank you.
This is not, as you've laid out, a separate 501c3. This is under the town's 501c3.
That's right. So we,
Organization, is that
right,
correct?
in the exploration, we decided that other jurisdictions had proved that actually the town can function as a nonprofit in this particular instance.
And I do think that, because in the last meeting, we, saw some different options, and they, some of them were where there's a separate 503C, some were not, some it's a department. I think Stephanie knows that I still lean more towards a different, I agree with everything here, but I lean towards a different structure where there's actually a separate 503C, where all of these representatives are actually the legal directors of it. But that's a debate that, I think the new council needs to rub their nose in and figure out where it goes. This will work in different ways.
And I think other jurisdictions have done that, but they, as it's kind of developed, they've been able to see that that wasn't a necessary step, although it might be the option that other jurisdictions have made.
And I won't speak for any particular element of our tourism businesses, but from the ongoing conversations I have, whether it be from people at Freshfields or whatever, my sense is that this is something, whether this will work or not, we won't know till we try it, but I think there is in fact a very strong interest in at least trying to walk down the road and see whether this is something that will benefit the community.
And of course, the idea is that then also attracts a share to be determined of the ATAX dollars, right?
That's
the
correct.
ATAX dollars normally that we send
That
to
go
CVB.
to the Visitors Bureau, right?
Prior to this getting more formalized, is there any plans to have a sit-down discussion with CVB? Or is this gonna be kind of done and then it's gonna be a phone call to CVB after the fact? What's the thought process? Because it's a long-standing relationship here. And
That's
while I
correct.
support the move, I've been pretty, I think, supportive behind the scenes. What's the strategy for communicating this issue before we get public or overly public?
Well, we are public right
Yeah,
now.
I know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we don't have an audience of thousands.
No, but we are on YouTube. But anyways,
We don't beam this downtown. So.
right. There is still value in the CVB relationship. I don't think any of the options that I presented, meaning, taking the revenue away completely, but I do think giving them a heads up and kind of a phased approach, or maybe a time frame for them to be able to prepare their budget, because we should be conscious of that as well.
I think that's very important myself, just to let them know, here's what we're thinking. It's going to be happening next year, but this is the road we're talking about. And I think they've always had a good relationship with us as far as sharing information and trying to help us, that it's only fair to let them know.
I agree.
But we've not done that yet, is that correct?
That's correct. This is simply exploratory.
Okay, and what
Or
is
has
your
been.
timing on the implementation of this, depending upon you get new council support and approval for this?
After the PGA.
Okay, so SATAX money is typically awarded, I think, sometime in the April timeframe, so this really is still a year
Year
away
away.
from any impact on any of the standard operating procedures today.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense for even just the creation of this. If this were to move forward, you need to kind of get, we can say we'd like to have these people, participate, but they also these are paid professionals that have a workload that they have to tend to too. So that's why I said, that could be a member from each one of those, but it might not necessarily be who we would prefer it to be.
Well, the only thing I would throw out is that, the SATAX process, the committee meets in April. And they don't normally deal with these monies, they deal with all of the rest.
That's right.
But if the timeline could get there, I think that is a real opportunity for this effort to try to aim at that same timeline, and it might be an opportunity for this group to then be able to, at the same time, say, look, we've identified the kinds of things that we would do that bring more value added than the same amount of money being spent by CVB, and having the opportunity for the Accommodations Tax Committee to be a part of that process. If it's not done, then you really are off a complete other year. So,
Stephanie, you may know this, or you, Stephanie, when do we typically write the check to CVB? Oh,
Quarterly.
so once a quarter we do it.
Quarter.
And so at some point, we would have the option of doing it in a third or fourth quarter as opposed to waiting
Right.
a new 12-month cycle. Is that correct? Or are we committed once we're committed?
In May, we have the first reading of the budget, so for next year, the amount is.
Yeah, it doesn't change the amount.
Right, but probably we need to tell them too, because they also own the fiscal.
I'm just trying to understand, are we committed at 12-month intervals, or can we be committed only at 3-month intervals?
3 months.
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
okay. Any other input or thought?
No, I think this is a good foundation to start from, and that the new mayor and council will have to further discuss this.
And again, I want to stress it. I think the interest is there to want to pursue this until we either discover it works or we discover it was a good idea on paper, but it didn't work in concept. But I think
agree.
there's a real appetite to see us try to.
Great,
try to do it.
thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie. Let's move to new business, to consider approval of ordinance 2020-14, which is an ordinance to amend Article 14, General Regulations, Chapter 1, Flood Damage Prevention. And Bruce, you are going to give us an overview.
Yes, Mayor. Fairly quickly, and any questions you may have afterwards. I want to take the first section as basically most of the changes we're having. And that is that there are some typographical errors in our flood ordinance that were discovered when we went back and did a pretty extensive review of the flood ordinances and what needed to be added, what needed to be changed based on the new flood maps and some of the new language. That being that when the ordinance was originally developed, it had a 2-digit format. Some of the reference points in the various sections of the ordinance still reference that 2-digit format, but the format actually changed to a 3-digit format during some time frame between 2013 and now. Petra and I tried to figure out when all this happened and why, but we couldn't pin it down. But anyway, our flood ordinance is now, every section is based on a 3-digit format. And so it's just a matter of changing out the reference points in the body of the flood ordinance to reference the 3-digit format, because the sections they reference are obviously not there based on the 2 digits. So that's just cleaning that up. The next one is on Article 14, Section 178. That is to amend that ordinance to add basically the limit of moderate wave action language to that ordinance, because that applies to basically V-zone requirements for construction purposes, which involves the new delineation line in the flood map for the acronym LIMWA. So that's just adding that language to it. The next point would be a new definition, along with the adoption of the new flood maps. The new flood maps are utilizing a new datum. That datum is the National American Vertical Datum of 1988, and that's just adding a definition explaining what that is. The lastly and most probably talked about within the last 2 to 3 months is the unforeseen consequence of adopting the new flood maps had an adverse effect on our current construction practices of today in regards to roof heights and the ability to park under homes. What's happening, can we bring this graph up?
Yeah.
It's coming? Okay, it's coming. But anyway, do I need to click it? All right. Still not. I don't.
Come on. Well, it was going too good. I knew something was going to happen.
You broke it.
I broke it.
Why don't you go ahead? I think we can.
Yeah. Anyway, so basically it's all based on the way we measure roof heights today. And when I say we, I'm talking about the ARB as well as the zoning and building of the town. And that is that the base flood elevation, we measure from the base flood elevation of the given property up to, for us, it's called the mean roof height, which is just an average of all the peaks and valleys on the roof. And that is directly proportional. So if you're currently sitting at an AE 14, for instance, and you're measuring up to get that 40-foot roof height, and now your new elevation is going to be an AE 11, you just were reduced 3 feet. That's coming up. The 3 feet has a dramatic effect when you start looking at how to park under the homes. As you see in the graphic when it comes up, based on a new flood elevation, your actual ceiling height under your home is going to be at a max about 5 feet, because we have about an average of a 3-foot elevation change across the island. Now, that's not to say that we don't have 1 foot and that we got some places that have 5 feet. It's just kind of an average to give us an idea of what we're looking at. So as you see, the first drawing, or is it showing both now? Or
Okay.
one? I don't know where we're at.
That's the first one. There's the first one you had right there. See, opening the map.
Yeah, okay. So on the old map is what we're currently building to today. And if you can see the drawing, I mean, it's a little hard to see, but underneath the house is looking at about 9 foot, I believe. I can hardly see it. I'm sorry, 8 foot 1.5 inches. If you switch to the new map, or the new graphic based on the new maps, if that would change, there we go.
5 feet, 1.5.
So that's based on just a 3-foot change. So you now no longer have the ability to park under your home. In order to maintain your roof heights, let me try that again. In order to maintain your ceiling heights within your home, that what we see today, which is an average there of 11 foot, and then the second floor of roughly between 9 and 10, the roofs would flatten out. I mean, you wouldn't have the pitch that you see today. So it's all proportional based on how we measure roof heights. And It's having a dramatic effect across the island with contractors that were very concerned about the change. Our designers, I've been on the phone with quite a few of them, and they were looking for some kind of resolution. What can we do? Started having a meeting with the ARB. We discussed the fact the ARB has some ideas on what to do based on what we refer to as a design flood elevation, which we account for the 1 foot freeboard, and then we come up with some form of a hypothetical, not hypothetical, but come up with an elevation island-wide, say, oh, you can do this. Well, we looked at that, but the variation and changes across our island are such that no one elevation would fix all the problems. So we looked at it again, well, we could do site-specific evaluation. All right, well, we could do site-specific evaluation. That's an option. We can do that. But the problem is they're going to end up submitting for a variance to have their roof height come up to what they are currently today so they can park under their houses. And one, that's going to be quite a lengthy process to get to the permit side of things. But I mean, if you try to do every property out here and have a variance come across to the BZA for every single property because you're doing site-specific evaluations, we're creating a mess. So I posed to the ARB, I said, well, what if we were able to say, hey, all new projects, and we're talking just new construction from the ground up. Doesn't involve additions, doesn't involve any type of remodeling work. What if we were to say any new projects would then be governed under the old maps, basically the current flood maps that we use today, if that was a possibility? Well, the problem there was that I wasn't sure that I could get that approved. Not by council, because it first has to go to the state FEMA office. Any flood ordinance change has to be done through the state, and then it filters back down to the jurisdiction for council to view. It has been approved by the state FEMA office and the state NFIP coordinator. We had to make some language changes, and we were playing with the language back and forth and how it should read. Finally got that ironed out, and they finally approved it. So it's being presented today for your review and your approval if you think this is a good idea, this is something we need to pursue, or should we just, scrap it and go back to site-specific evaluations. We can go either route. One is easier, obviously, and the other one's really cumbersome. And that's pretty much what the changes are for today on the flood elevation maps. If you got any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Let me get a motion in a second, and then we can open it up for discussion. So why don't I ask for a motion to amend ordinance 2020-14, which is an ordinance to amend Article 14. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so I will open it up for discussion. Mary Ann?
Okay. You said please explain to me what we can pursue. You just said we have this option to pursue.
Yeah, we basically, between the ARB and the building department,
Right.
we have an option A, option B. Option A was to see if we could get the exception approved through council. That was option A. If that fails, we have an option B, which is to come up with a design flood elevation. And we're not quite sure how to put that together at this moment, but it would be site-specific because the elevations vary across the island on every piece of property. So it would have to be a site-specific evaluation. What was your base flood at this given property? How high do we have to go up to allow you to go parking underneath? How does that going to affect your roof height? I mean, so there's a lot of consideration there, and we haven't quite ironed that out yet, but we feel we can do it. We just have to have the steps in place to be able to do it, and we don't have those in place at the moment.
So I guess I don't understand, where does this 3.5-foot difference?
Okay, that's just an average.
That's
All
an
right, because we
average.
have some properties that only have a 1-foot
Sure.
difference. All right, understand that between the current flood maps we use today and the new flood maps we're going to in January, there's a 1-foot negative between just the datum information, roughly. Okay, it's not quite 1 foot, but it's real close. So that, taking that into account, you have properties that net 1-foot difference, and you got properties that have a net 5-foot difference. They kind of just go through and you average out. For the most part across the island, we're seeing roughly about a 3-foot change net. That's why we use the graphic of 3 foot. And, you know,
Bruce, sorry,
just to give
can
you
I
an
ask a question,
example.
like a really simple one, but before people who understand this better have more complicated questions, because I'm probably the only one who just, well, I mean, by definition, the town council and the mayor know everything and understand everything, but I don't understand this. Can you just give us the
translate it
Cliff
to
Notes
English?
translated into English? What are we, if you ask me to vote right now, I would scratch my head and say, can we get a simple, like, this is the issue?
Can I
All right.
stop for a second? Can I ask the mayor to get, because I heard the best succinct solution, or the summary of this from you that I've heard. Would you offer to do that again?
Bruce may jump across and say it's the wrong one, but.
Well, that's okay, but at least I
but
thought I
think-
understood it when I heard it come
But
from
I
you.
think as I understand this, and I think as Bruce made this comment, that this is generally initially coming from the ARB, the architects and the designers, so they're seeing a real problem. And to some extent, because of the way in which we measure our specs require where you can start a house, where the freeboard needs to be and where the top roof line can be, we've put new construction in a position where at some time they have to make some decisions on trading off their ability for underground parking with the level and height that they would like to have versus their ability to have a house at the top roof line that they would like to have that works both for their house in terms of the look and feel, the geometry, and also looks compared to their neighbors. So if you're the lot that's now building between 10 houses that have been there for 10 years that have their freeboard here, their roof line is 35 feet up or 45 feet, we now are potentially builders are having to figure out how to configure these houses when this piece is being measured off of a different piece than here, and that's caused them some concerns that are realistic. I think what Bruce has said is one answer is to just deal with each one as a separate BZA. We have a BZA member
Right.
here, and as great as the BZA members are, I don't personally think that putting out there the uncertainty that everybody building in one of these zones,
No.
another unknown for them is, am I gonna get BZA approval?
Right.
Even if it becomes pretty routine, it's not the best deal, but they've been, as a result of this, it's impacting their ability to design in the same fashion as their neighboring houses, and with the kinds of roof heights and ceilings. The thing which you didn't ask, which I was concerned about, and that Bruce absolutely, is adamant will not be the case. I always worry about unintended consequences, and the concern was that at the same time, we want to be encouraging existing homes to remodel,
Right.
rebuild, and in some cases, we've all said that the new FEMA lines benefit them, because in most cases, they've gone down, and that takes the pressure off of some homes that were built close to grade of not having to go through the raising issue. And so, as you know, Bruce assures me that as this is written, because it only relates to new construction, it's still going to allow us to not put an impediment in front of, a new impediment in front of remodeling by having to go back to the old maps. Yeah, so, am I accurate?
So-
Yes.
So new construction can live with the old maps, basically.
New construction would
Would stay with the old maps, or the new,
No.
whichever is to their advantage.
they would go to the new maps.
But basically, the way
New
the,
construction would be the new maps.
They would go to the, well, they would go to the more restricted, which in most cases is the new, is the bulk. Yes.
Right.
So I think it's the right, and we need to get, I think it's, remember, this is a first and second reading. I think it's the right thing to do because we're under the clock, but I think we should remember it's a 2 reading. And so, you know, we had a couple people correctly come up and comment, and I think that what needs to happen during the next month is to now dig into every question we have to make sure that there are no unintended consequences that we haven't considered. But conceptually, it's the right place. Klaus, did I answer your question?
It's closer. I'm starting.
I'll go closer. More questions?
No, I mean, I think, well, 2 comments. One is, as a homeowner, and somebody who lives on the island and sees the island, having the ability to put garages underneath houses is critically important.
Right.
Otherwise, we're building garages everywhere, and it
Right.
takes up more land, and it's a mess, number 1. 2 is, we don't want to impact these roof lines negatively like this. They're not going to look good. I mean, that's what it boils down to. So I think this is a good solution. I think going to the BZA for exceptions on every deal
Oh, that's
is
terrible.
impossible.
It's-
We're just
It's-
creating a
it's-
nightmare.
That's just
That's
not
what
gonna happen.
It would be rough,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
If,
I-
if you would like to talk afterwards, we can do that.
Vote in the meantime.
I feel that,
Do that again.
I agree with what Dan said. We can't have every application going to the Building and Zoning or BZA. And also, I'd have to understand this thing much more comfortably to vote for it. I can vote for on the first reading, but for the final vote, I really have to make sure in my own mind that this is something I would encourage for Kiowa.
And again, so that the audience and the community understands, well, what's the, why then are we trying to handle this on first reading today is because the new maps do go into effect in the end of January.
Okay.
So we have a hard ending point here, and so, and it takes 2 readings. So if we get the first reading done, we then leave ourselves, we leave the new council time to make this draw in the second reading. And I would encourage the individuals we've heard from and others to weigh in here in the next few days.
Okay.
And Stephanie, I would add, I mean, you spent much of your career in this same world of planning. You are supportive of this?
Oh, yes, very supportive. Like everyone said, you typically don't want, if you already see an issue, go ahead and address the issue as opposed to
Right.
send it to the BZA for variance, because it does create a burden in terms of the homeowner, because they don't know if their application will be approved or not, they don't know what they're gonna do. So, I would support if this is something that council feels, is necessary to go ahead and approve it. And of course, after today's reading, Bruce is around, and we can always have one-on-one meetings with,
Okay.
the council members, because honestly, we're gonna have 2 new council members, we're gonna bring them up to speed anyways on this, because the second reading's gonna occur in Mayor, the second reading's gonna occur on their term, so we're gonna have to have probably a, separate meeting with them leading up to leading up to second reading on this ordinance.
Yeah, and I'm available anytime, so.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
Any other additional discussion? All right, then we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so it is approved on first reading. All right, we have item B, which is to consider approval of resolution 2020-06, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor of the town of Kiowa Island to execute an easement agreement by which Haulover Creek Development Company LLC is deeding a landscape recreation and utility easement to the town of Kiowa Island. Stephanie, are you going to do a quick summary of that one?
Well, oh yes, thank you, Mayor and members of council. This comes as a recommendation from Ways and Means to approve. We're currently, right now, we have been working with Hollover Creek, which I believe is parent company for Kiwa Island Golf Resort. And with that, we had did improvements with regards to the turn lane there on the Parkway. We call the intersection there. And so by adding the new right turn lane into the End Creek area, it costs the town, we had to shift, realign our current bike path over. So we moved everything to the edge of our current right-of-way there. So we no longer have any additional right-of-way behind that new, the new and realigned bike path. So we worked with Hollover Creek and asked if they would consider giving the town, it's at no cost, an easement. So we have, on average, about a 20-foot easement behind the new parkway, behind the new bike path. And what that will allow us in the future, if the town wanted to either adjust the bike path or add some landscaping behind our bike path, we will have that right to do it. The easement spells out what we can and cannot do within our, the document spells out what we can or cannot do within the easement. So that is kind of short and dirty in terms of the request. I think it's something that that the town needs, and I'm very happy to say that Hollover Creek was very amenable in giving that easement to the town.
And if you're trying to visualize where this is, there's a map, but essentially is that area from the new right turn lane that will eventually be used to pull into the
Parking for the,
Freshfields there.
mhm.
And along the bike path, landward along the bike path, by the area that's kind of raised and elevated right now. So it's giving us options for landscaping. It's also giving us options if we ever, in the future, if traffic someday, if that property is developed, the traffic on that turn lane is heavy, we may wish to move the bike path back, and this gives us some land to do that. Do I have a motion to?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. Do I have any questions, comments?
No, sir.
No, Mayor.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, Rhoda, I think this is yours, and you've already spoken to it, but to consider approval of resolution 2020-7, resolution authorizing the redemption of the general obligation bond issued by the town of Kiwa Island on October 12, 2016. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any additional questions, comments? Are there any additional things you'd like Rhoda to address?
No,
right.
thank you.
You know, we've, I think, intentionally sat on this loan for a couple of years because we were earning more money in the same or more money in the state general investment fund. And so the idea, particularly when you're a community where you could have a hurricane, a major beach renourishment, the idea of having a couple $1 million extra in the bank, cash flow was good. But earlier this month, particularly a small group got together, and I think when they looked at the numbers and where we project interest rates to remain, which is, what are we earning in
15 points.
15 basis points, that this makes sense to do.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's important to mention for the public, if they're listening, the town is limited severely by state restrictions as to where it can invest its money. So it's not like we have lots of options to invest in the stock market and do other things. By paying this off, we pick up a minimum of 100 basis points for the next couple of years on $1.6 million declining balance. It would be, if we needed immediate cash, we think we have plenty. It makes sense financially to pay this off now and save that money. Otherwise, we're paying interest we don't need to.
So
That's a good summary. That's exactly right.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved. All right, to consider approval of resolution 2020-8, a resolution to allow emergency repair noise. Stephanie, do you want me to handle that, or are you going to handle that?
Repair
Oh,
noise.
you can go.
Emergency noise.
I thought you'd let me do that. This is just a short-term fix, which, to our noise ordinance, which ultimately the new council needs to consider and potentially deal with in terms of a permanent change to our noise ordinance. But you may recall that several months ago, we made a revision to the town's noise ordinance, to that part of the ordinance that related to noise between the hours of 11 o'clock p.m. and sometime at 7 in the morning, where there used to be rather ambivalent language that you could not have ongoing noise that extended beyond your property line, and it made it difficult in terms of enforcement as to what level of noise was appropriate and allowed and not. And so we, I think, did the absolute right thing, and we amended that and established a specific decibel level for that ongoing noise, which was 60? 60. What we didn't recognize is that as you write an ordinance, the more you go from general language to very specific language, you at the same time tie yourselves in that if you have unexpected emergency circumstances, things that you didn't expect, but which in the public interest need to be addressed, you haven't left your latitude to deal with it. And I think we've recognized that we have that problem with the noise ordinance, that there can be and will be occasions when there will be, and it will be in the public interest, the ability for us to waive or essentially not enforce for a period of time the noise decibel level after 11 o'clock, if there's in fact a legitimate public interest for doing that. So this resolution is essentially, the important language is that the town of Kiowa Island hereby resolves and authorizes the town administrator, so it is providing the town administrator and or the mayor, but the administrator, to address any noise complaints arising from emergency construction or repair measures necessary to safeguard or restore public or private utilities within the town limits. So this is not a wide open that, you know, a homeowner says, oh, I want to work all night to get my house done. But on the other hand, if Kiowa Island Utilities got a major outage or Berkeley Electric has got an issue, it is giving the town administrator the latitude to consider the circumstances, work with the entity, which could be a public utility, it could be a private commercial entity, could be the community association, but to at least give us an out that we could make those judgments and deal with that situation.
So if the dam breaks, we can fix it.
Somebody can fix it, yeah. So, that is the intent and the history behind this. So, let me go ahead and ask for a motion.
So moved.
Let me ask for a second. And then with that, let me, ask if you have any comments or questions, and I would certainly also, Stephanie and Joe, if you have any comments you think important for them to understand.
No questions.
Hearing nothing, all in favor?
Aye.
And again, this at some point needs to then get converted and turned into language in the ordinance, right?
Did you have something, Joe?
I was agreeing with.
Oh.
All right, item E, which is to consider approval of the funding request from the Kiowa Island Conservancy for Phase 2 of the groundwater table and marsh vulnerability studies, which Lee presented to us last month, the current state of the first phase. So welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
This time looking for money. That's okay.
Well, yeah, as the mayor mentioned, we're looking to go into phase 2 of our research projects that we proposed last year. So, to kind of give everybody an update, just quickly, we proposed for a groundwater and a marsh vulnerability projects, and they were going to be working with the College of Charleston and with some of our organizational partners on the island in order to look into specific conditions within our marsh and our groundwater. And I'll start with the groundwater study. So what we did with that is we installed 21 groundwater monitoring wells across Kiva Island. This included conservancy property, Kika property, as well as residential property. And we installed different types of data loggers in order to gather information. And we're starting to see that there's a correlation between a lot of different variables on the island, including rainfall as well as tides. And now that we have this data, we're looking into kind of further refining some of the research that we're already conducting. And some of the things that we're interested in is the relationship between pond levels and tides with the groundwater. So we're proposing that we're looking into different types of research methods in order to investigate this further. And this would include putting in things like drive point wells in order to get specific spots between ponds and pre-existing wells in order to gather information about the water level. And that would be able to correlate all this data in order to understand how those relationships work, especially during high tide events or high rainfall events where we have accumulation in our ponds, and seeing how either stormwater runoff or maybe even percolation through the groundwater or through the subsurface is occurring. And that'll give us a better instance of how groundwater is recharged, how the soil impacts the recharge of that groundwater, and how stormwater affects ponds. And I think the work from Lucas Hernandez with his sea level rise study on the island, where he was looking at rainfall, this could be incorporated within that data set in order to further refine it and better understand how stormwater works on the island, and give us a better clue of how we can more refine our methods for looking at problem areas that we may be able to mitigate. So that's one part of it. Another part is to continue these monitoring efforts that we are currently having within our groundwater monitoring wells. So right now we have data loggers that will sit in the wells for years and years, and occasionally we'll go in and we'll collect that data. And this is just a chance to further refine those methods and be able to allow the Conservancy in the future to be able to do that autonomously without the help of the college. So this is going to be helping us out with that and kind of further refine the protocol for monitoring for groundwater. Another thing we're looking into is, now that we're looking into the conductivity, which is another way to look at salinity, we're trying to find what types of chemicals we would see in the groundwater, things like nitrates, nitrites, phosphorus, that sort of thing. So what we're wanting to do is take samples out of the groundwater, test it, and see what we're looking at. That way we can determine how vegetation on the island is being impacted by the groundwater. And that will give us a better understanding of, you know, if we get a 5 parts per thousand rating, what does that mean? Does that mean that sea level, the water from the sea is coming in and impacting the vegetation? Or is it maybe, you know, fertilizers, that sort of thing? That way we can better prepare on how to mitigate issues that we see with our vegetation on the island, which I understand is a topic of concern with many residents. So those are the 3 things with the groundwater project that we're looking to further investigate, and we're looking into monies for that. And if it's all right, I'll go into the marsh vulnerability project as well. So within our first phase of the marsh vulnerability project, we looked into how the shorelines in the marsh were changing. So the open creeks, how they were changing over time, as well as the vegetative extents, like how much marsh are we losing every year or accreting every year. And being able to understand where those impacts are allow us to better understand where we need to put out practices such as marsh restoration or oyster restoration in order to protect areas in the marsh. So with this, we were able to map all the shorelines for 10 different years from 1977 all the way up to current year, 2019, with current NAEP imagery from the USDA. And we were able to identify some spots that we identified as not problematic, as good, and some that were sort of bad. And now that we have these sites prioritized, we need to understand what types of conditions are in those specific sites and what types of methods we can deploy in order to fix the problems that we're observing. And with the Marsh Vulnerability Project in the phase 2, what we're looking at is understanding those specific conditions within the marsh using GIS imagery. And what we would be doing is consulting with the college in order to look at those specific conditions, mapping things like slope, things like the intertidal levels. That way we can determine which method works best in those areas. And in general, we're looking at using this information in order to deploy marsh restoration efforts directly. And we believe that with the information we gathered from the first phase and second phase, that we would have enough information to go ahead and be able to make decisions about where we should put marsh restoration designs and how we can do that. That way, when we go and apply for funding, we have all of our data and our ducks in a row, so we can go ahead and do it. And with that, there's also a unique opportunity that we were presented to by the college. Over the past summer and into the fall, Michigan State and NASA and USGS were working on this thing called the unvegetated vegetated marsh ratio. What they were looking at is things like sediment and vegetation within the marsh and how that impacts the vulnerability of the marsh. This piqued the interest of SCDHEC OCRM, South Carolina DNR, as well as the Nature Conservancy in their South Carolina chapter, and looking to roll out this entire marsh study for the entire state coastline. And with the college being sort of the prime people for deploying these things, figuring out the methods, they saw Kiowa Island as a potential pilot site for this study before they roll it out for the entire coast. And they're looking at Kiowa Island and the phase 2 of the Marsh Vulnerability Project as a starting point. So this was included into the first, this was included, I think, in like October, brought to our attention. So this was included within the proposal, and it wouldn't add any additional funds. This would be on top of all the other projects that we have proposed. So this is pretty interesting, but what we would get out of this is the first set of information that would be available for the state. And what I've heard from our partners at the college is that with this information that we're gathering, since we've already conducted a lot of analyses in phase 1, would actually have more finer information than what would be released to the state in the end. So not only do these research projects have statewide implications, they also help us to prepare better to mitigate and adapt to certain problems that we see with sea level rise, flooding, and other types of natural environmental issues. But that's currently our proposed projects, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Just so it's clear, the amount of funding that you're looking for or seeking from the town is 32 for the first project and is it 19 or?
I think it's 17 for the second one.
17 for the second.
Mm.
And I'm going to open it up to questions. But the obvious one I have is so far I'm interested and I see everything, the value coming out of this, but when I get a phase 1, a phase 2, I just get kind of concerned, okay, how many phases are there?
Yeah.
And what are we really in for? So on each project, can you give me a sense of, so what's the end game on the water one? What are we finally going to see in terms of specific recommendations, actions, and is that 3 more phases out, 2 more phases, and what are we potentially in for cost? And the same thing on the Marsh project.
Yes, so both of these projects were first proposed in 2 phases. So we planned on having both of these projects end with these second phases. So following this, we would have the information that we would really need in order to go forth with some on-the-ground research, or not on-the-ground research, but on-the-ground projects that we can go out and start planning and start designing and start implementing. So I kind of see these 2 projects being kind of concluded at the end, and us using the information we get out of this to inform the public of what's going on, and also some of our organizational partners in order to understand how we can deploy efforts to improve our resilience in the island. And I think another, concern might be that, how are we going to, connect all of this? Because we have the adaptation management plan that I think is sort of kind of taken between the town and the KICA. And the Conservancy has taken note of that, and that's why I've been able to, go into these meetings and understand how we might be able to carry on additional research following this. I know that there's potential for, more efforts to collaborate between all these organizations. With these concluding at some time in this year, we're thinking that we're going to use the adaptive management plan as a way to continue on research for other things that we see that the community would like to look into and help develop thresholds and monitoring efforts with those.
So to finish the scope of these 2 programs, this funding request
It'll be end, yep.
Let me open up to questions.
I have no questions other than a comment, and I think I said this before. I think these are both terrific, very meaningful, very impactful depending on what the findings are, so I congratulate the Conservancy.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree, I strongly support what's going on. I think it's one of those key building blocks off which we can make better decisions, so I think we ought to continue phase two.
Mary Ann, any comments?
No.
Klaus, any
No.
comments? All right. Then I would ask for a motion to approve a funding request to the Key Island Conservancy for the amounts of $32,000 for the completion of phase 2 of the groundwater study and $17,000 for the completion. I'm actually gonna describe this as up to $32,000 and up to $17,000, just in case you have change left over when you, and $17,000 for the marsh study. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Lynn. To consider approval of the town attorney contract for Joseph Wilson. To that material. All right, we have just discussed this at length in the Ways and Means Committee, and also did convene an executive, an executive session, not for the purpose of making a decision, but for the purpose of informing and discussing the agreement. As a result of the Ways and Means Committee, the Ways and Means Committee recommended the approval of an additional one-year contract for Joseph Wilson. And you all have the recommended contract in front of you. It is, and I'm gonna look at Stephanie if I miss anything, but it is for all practical purposes similar to the existing agreement with respect to the scope of work, basic requirements. It does incorporate a new compensation level of $90,000 to be paid in monthly payments of $7,500. Beyond that, essentially all other elements of the contract remain the same as they were. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, the only kind of
We
change.
do not have a copy.
It's not here.
Now, I've
They-
seen
they
an
were
email
emailed to you,
copy,
Yeah,
but I don't have a
yeah,
copy in
yeah,
front of me.
email.
Okay, just to be clear.
The only small change is that, right now, the town attorney was doing more work in the municipal court. And so only small adjustment that we have is that he will still work with the consult staff in terms of any type of preparation. But if there becomes like trial, anything, or, criminal matter with the court, he will work with, another attorney to handle that. That's the only slight difference.
I think that was our understanding anyway, was it not? This was my
Yeah,
understanding.
pretty much ours,
Yeah.
but he got him kind of pulled into doing all of that work.
I see him nodding his head, okay.
Yeah, he got pulled into doing all that work, and so we just made it clear in the contract that
Good.
I can't really pull him anymore.
That's fair.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any new or additional conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome, Joe.
Welcome back.
And lastly, we have to consider approval of the 2021 meeting dates. And I recognize every year at the last meeting of the year, we approve the dates for the following year, but always with the disclaimer that many of these dates relate to committees that other people manage and have discretion around besides us, such as the Planning Commission and Environmental Committee and BZA. So we do this in an attempt to, as best we can, communicate to people when committees are gonna occur, but any committee chair does have the ability after they reconvene next year to alter these dates if necessary, and we'll handle that then. It does importantly keep the town council, continues the town council and the Ways and Means Committee at their traditional first Tuesday of the month at 2 o'clock for town council, and the fourth Tuesday of the month for Ways and Means. So again, it obviously is subject to change. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Does anybody have any questions or any of dates on here that you know, we try to catch these, make sure we haven't caught up against the holiday or something?
I have no discrepancies with them.
Thank you.
As an attendee, I don't want you later coming and saying, hey, I wanted to sit in that meeting.
I
and you
promise
didn't."
to withhold
Okay.
any objections.
All right, because we are concerned about your ability to attend.
Yes.
All right, that passes. We are done. Now, Town Administrator's Report, we do have a couple items.
I just have 2 items. One, I would like to update you all on the municipal judge search. We have, I thank Joe Wilson and the current Judge Strout was on the initial review committee, along with myself. We received 17 letters of interest, so that was a larger number than I expected. We narrowed it down to 5. We had 1 that withdrew, so we have 4. So the next step then is when we get the mayor and new council in, I will then sit down with the mayor and determine how we want to proceed with the selection process. I would envision that the mayor would appoint 1 or 2 people, will figure out who those individuals would be on that small selection committee. If we need to do interviews with any of the 4, we will do that. Out of the 4, 1 is local, 1 lives, and the other 3 are outside of the Kiowa area. But I remember 1 being local.
I take it one of the locals withdrew.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had 2 locals.
Oh, okay, no. We have 2 locals then and 2 out. The 1 that withdrew actually lived in Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
So we have
So there were
2 locals and 2 that's out of Kiowa. They're in state, but they're just out of
Local
Kiowa.
behind Kiowa?
On Kiowa. And then the other 2 are in the Tri-County area.
Stephanie, when you say they're not on Kiowa, do they have any connection to Kiowa?
1 does. He has a family home here on Eugenia. They just choose not to live on Kiowa at this time, and I don't recall the other one. I don't recall.
So like we actually have real applications from people who have no real connection to Kiowa in terms of a home or anything.
Well, I don't want to say that right now. We have 3 that have a connection, and the 1 I don't remember.
Okay.
But certainly in the original big list, yes, there were a number that had no connection.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So that process, and the goal, of course, is just depending on the timing. Judge Strout, of course, is here through, his term doesn't expire until March 1. So we have a little bit of time to get this new person on board. Ideally, we'd like for them to work with Judge Strout for the next 2 months, and then, of course, be ready to go come March 1st. That's on the municipal judge. Any questions? Okay, the next update is the landscape project on the Parkway. As you all know, that Artigues was the bidder that was awarded, and based on their contract, their timeline was to be completed by the end of this year, but due to some unforeseen circumstances with the irrigation was in a worse shape than what we all anticipated. So they're taking all of their 3 weeks and probably some additional weeks to fix the irrigation systems and do some repairs or replacements. So, of course, we just didn't know until we got underground and looked at them and realized that they were just worse than what we thought. But the good news, though, is that when we officially signed the contract, they went ahead and had the grower start growing our plants. So our plants are growing at the location, at the site where we purchase our material from. So they're in the process of growing. What we'll see is that they'll start down, I think, from the Mingle Point and work their way up to the roundabout. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes.
They'll start down at that end of the parkway and work their way up to to the roundabout. After they complete the irrigation system, which I hope that should be soon, I think they found another problem. There's been another leak in our irrigation system. Once they're done with that, they're going to start putting in the trees, and then from the trees, they'll start putting in the plantings. They've actually said that in terms of any concern, of course, we know that here in South Carolina, the actual tree planting season is December, so that should be perfect for the trees. For the plants, they do not anticipate any problems. What they'll end up doing is that before, if they were on schedule, they would have started doing some maintenance and trimming of plants once they were in, but now they're going to go ahead and have the growers do any of the maintenance trimming of the plants so that when they're installed, we shouldn't have to have any of that done. Right now, they're looking at a timeline of having everything completed by the end of January, the 1st of February. But as I talked with both Brian and Jim today, Brian is being the project manager. I've stepped in prior to Brian being project manager and pushing them, but to stay on top of them, because what we do not want to happen, of course, is that they're still trying to put plants in when traffic is heavy during the PGA. Mm-hmm. And while we want the parkway to look nice, we want this to look nice not just because of the PGA, but because of our visitors and residents. We want to have a nice parkway. Our parkway is basically the front door to the community. So our push and our goal is that this project will be wrapped up and completed by the end of January. Our TEECs realize that, and they've already have agreed to add additional crew at no cost to the town. So they will be bringing in some additional crew to get this project going and completed. Any questions on the landscape project?
As long as they take care of the triangles, I'll be happy.
Okay, we'll make sure of that. We'll make sure of that. And I would like Joe, while doing the administrative report, he's going to give a quick update.
Thank you.
So I don't even know if this is the first time y'all have done this. Oh, okay. So we have annual employee disclosure statements that we collect, and I wanted to, it's been delayed reporting on you because it had been left off the agenda. But we did get them, I got them, I received them personally from every employee, and no one has disclosed any, plus one council member, and no one has disclosed any known conflict of interest. There were a few delays just with understanding exactly what the form said and making that clear to the employees. But other than that, there was nothing of concern reported to me.
So everything was clean?
Pardon?
Everything was good?
Yes,
okay.
Everything's fine.
It just, I think the council knows where this came from, but it's history, because I want to make sure this continues. After about 4 years ago, the great unfortunate time, we concluded that we needed to put in place some absolute, for the good of the town and frankly for the good of our employees, that we needed to put a process in that was allowed them to indicate whether there were any potential conflicts of interest, so that they could be out there, public, and they would then have comfort of knowing, is this a problem or not a problem, and how do I deal with it? Mm-hmm. And so a process was put in place about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that once a year, all of the employees fill out this form, which is essentially, do you know of any particular issues? Do you have any particular issues? It's no different than, for example, in a council meeting when, I indicate, well, I have a relationship to somebody who's, getting a grant for something. I think it's a good process. I hope it continues, and I hope our employees realize that it's a good thing for them, because then they aren't left wondering, well, geez, I have this business or relation, is it a problem or not a problem? And I'm happy to say that we've never had a problem, And where we've had concerns, it's allowed the town and those issues to work out how to handle the concern, so.
And I've seen that work itself out this year.
Yeah.
So it's
And
worked.
I'm the one who does provide one every year. When we first did this, we talked about having the council members do it. We kind of concluded that we didn't necessarily have the ability to require a council member to fill out a conflict of interest, but also concluded that because the town officials have to, in the state system, actually
Right.
already go in and divulge all, the whole realm of conflict of interest, that at the end of the day, it was being handled there. We were running behind this year, so I just want to make sure at the last meeting that we got your
Great.
report. Good. Okay. All right, so anything else for you, Joe?
No, sir.
Stephanie? All right, we'll go to committee updates and or any general council updates, and I am going to start with Marianne.
Chief, Mayor, I think you'll be happy to hear, at our public safety meeting, Chief Abrams reported in recognition of the issues that we have with response time here on Kiowa, and due to some staffing, dispatch, and staffing issues he's had in the whole department, they're reopening Medic 10 outside of the front gate. They're also acquiring 3 additional ambulances, which will impact us. It's a big deal, but he got approval in his budget. For Medic 10 outside of the gate, they'll be offering overtime shifts for people in the department to staff them. And it's kind of an incentive for them to do that. When he is going to start the staffing, I'm not sure, but I felt that was a good news report from Abrams.
And that's great. I mentioned to Stephanie and Chris, I don't know if you saw in the Post Courier over the weekend, the article on EMS rate or call rates, and they'd actually called out one on at the Ocean Course. That was one.
Well, they were not, they evidently are well aware that this is a problem. So I was very happy to hear his report. Did he have anything else, Stephanie? Okay. And that concludes my report, but I also would like to say thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilman Wydick, for your contributions and your work with this community. I think you're terrific. You've done a great job, and as a resident, I say thank you.
Excellent. Appreciate it. Dan?
Just quickly, the BZA and the Planning Commission both remain active these months. Unlike, unfortunately, the Arts Council, we're still on our 90-day delay, month at a time, until our virus situation is under control. We just can't have any kind of public events, so we're not active in that sense. It's been tough on the artists, obviously, but from the town's point of view, we're just in a position like most towns are where we can't do this. And I would add my compliments to you two guys. It's been a treat to serve with you. You've done a great job.
Appreciate it. Chris? But you can't compliment yourself.
Oh, God, no. I have a wife for that, because she's constantly doing that. First of all, I wish good luck to all the candidates on today's ballot, including, I see one in the audience, and to all the other candidates. I hope it all works out the way you folks want. Second, to the staff, and several of them are here today. You guys have been wonderful. Even though we haven't always agreed, it's always been a pleasure. And finally, I would pass my thanks on to the mayor. I appreciate that, gosh, 4 years ago, over a very expensive bottle of wine, I think it was about $20, you used your persuasive skills to get me to run, and you got me drunk. But I thank you. It's been a good experience. I hope that the next council takes as strategic of a vision as you do. And I don't know how many people are aware of the more than decade service he's provided, but we've been very well served by Craig Weaver, and so I thank you for that.
Klaus, any updates or comments?
Well, I don't think anyone wants to do an update from the audit committee. And thankfully the audit is done, so I think we're going to leave that. So I think all that is left for me to say is really what's been said eloquently before. I want to thank Chris and Craig for great leadership. I think this town and the citizens should feel really, really, really fortunate. Therefore, I would like to compliment them. I don't believe for 1 second that Chris's wife compliments him, because that'd be the only wife, but we'll do it. Thank you, and it was an honor to serve with you.
Klaus, is it time for the group hug?
Well, Craig doesn't want to do it. I mean, what can I tell you? It's just,
I don't do group hugs.
I think it's this Yankee stuff, no emotions.
I did hold the mayor's update to the end, though, because I didn't know how much time we had, and I don't want to hold this too long. I know you all got polls to watch. But I do want to, there are a couple things going on. Actually, the staff has continued to be really, really busy. There are a number of things that are in the works, and part of this is an update, and part of it is maybe my last chance to the new council to say, I remember Scott asked me one day, well, what's the 3 or 4 most important things the new council needs to focus on? So I just want to take this opportunity to update a couple things. But I won't go too long. Roads. You all know that we have this issue out here now, and an opportunity to influence the county and take a strong role in trying to bring about a good solution for the road issues that we've long had. We've done a couple things. I think by now we know, and Stephanie has sent out a number of communications, that the county is looking for citizen input. We have tried our best to make that our citizens aware of that. I hope that they are taking the opportunity. I know it's difficult. It's a lot of data. It's hard to look at a bunch of lines and go, well, what's the right way? But I hope that they will take the opportunity. But more importantly, the Seabrook, Kiowa, the Community Association, the town, we've been messing around for, seems like, 20 years. I've only been here 15. Charlie, probably 20 more before that. Trying to get some reasonable solutions to having safer and more functional roads between here and getting on and off the island to other places. We've done a lot, and we've never had a good avenue to do that. I do think that for the first time, and I don't want to overplay it, but the first time, because of the half-cent sales tax, there actually is a process and mechanism that at least gives Kiowa and Seabrook and John's Island, because I'm convinced this can be a win-win for everybody, the opportunity to try to influence this project. So I strongly encourage, if I were to have any input on, when the next council gets together and has a strategy meeting, what are the top few issues? They need to get on top of this. And I know that it is an issue of importance to our commercial entities. It's important to Freshfields, it's important to the resort, it's important to developers. We know it's important to our citizens. But as I've said in a couple of communications, nobody outside of Kiowa and Seabrook has a strong interest in improving the roads to Kiowa. It's only going to happen if we drive that. So John Taylor, our staff is kind of on the staff right now, taking the lead in tracking what's going on, providing input. The former mayor Charlie LaPuma, Paul Roberts, who have been involved with these issues for years, have been working closely and helping us with ideas. But we have a window here that we've not had, and I hope that we will take advantage of that. Second thing I want to just quickly bring you up to speed with is the second generation coagulants, or Bobcats. I know that most people probably have no idea how much work Jim Jordan and Stephanie Braswell have been doing over the last 4 months nonstop on this issue, because you probably saw the initial splash and our desire to get people to sign up. But underlying this, we have been working a number of different avenues. There has been the question of whether we can and should have a legislative action, whether we could get a moratorium to stop the use. We've held off on that and tried to give both the pest control industry, pest control companies and the Clemson Department of Public, whatever, the latitude to do some things to help us determine how to approach this. I've always tried to make sure there aren't good guys and bad guys in this. But there is going to be a point, I think, where the next town council pretty quickly here is going to need to sit down, evaluate the success of everything we've done, and make a decision on whether working with all of those entities, despite their best intentions, is going to be fruitful, or whether we are gonna need to go back to pursuing the legislative option. And I know that Senator Campson has been a significant
Very
ally
supportive.
for us, and I think his door is open. In the last couple of months, Jim has been working with a team from the DNR to do testing on the island, capturing rodents, raccoons, and whatever. Those studies are showing the chemical is still out there, but it's inconsistent and still not helping us better understand how. I just got this morning from Clemson a survey that they did with trying to identify all the companies working on Kiowa and do a confidential survey to get a handle on how many were using the chemicals, how many are now. That would tell you, I read it quickly, that more than half a year ago were using SGAs on the island. They would claim that none are, or that one is now. I'm not sure that, we understand whether that's accurate or not accurate, but we know the chemicals are still out there. One of the things that they did highlight is that the pest control companies are suggesting that their toughest hurdle right now are property managers. That there are so many properties on the island where it is because it's either a rental or it's a part-time owner who's, and I understand it, they're not here for, house is closed up for 6 months, and when they come down, they do not want to be met with rats. And at the end of the day, the companies are in the dilemma of either having to give up business and essentially just start to walk away from Kiowa, or do what the client asks. But they would tell you that property management companies are not buying in particularly to the concept.
Individual owners are not the issue, it's the professional management
Well, I mean,
companies.
Stephanie will tell you, of course, we only have about half of our residents who actually ever did the Bobcat pledge, but yes, what they're saying is it's property managers, people who have the authority for somebody else.
Yeah.
That's probably an area, so, again, my point of all that is just simply I wanna leave with you that there is a lot that's going on. We've really given all of these entities a lot of rope, more than I think Jim and Stephanie wished that I had. But I do think the next council pretty quickly is gonna have to sort of sit down and take a look at this and figure out, okay, is this going anywhere, or are we gonna have to try again for a legislative action? COVID, I just wanna remind the new council is going to have a meeting on the 5th. Fourth
Friday.
to deal with our COVID. And again, all I would highlight there is that I would hope at the very least, considering Kiowa does not, we still appear like we've dodged the bullet.
So far.
So far, as I cough. But we don't know.
Actually, Craig, broadly speaking, strangely, South Carolina is, if you looked at the 7-day new cases by state, South Carolina is right down at the bottom, basically with the small New England states.
Although partly with Charleston offsetting Greenville, if you want to go up to
Oh,
Greenville.
my God.
you might not feel- yeah.
Greenville
You're
just
essentially
voted
right.
on the
still,
Essentially
master
right.
yeah.
I agree with you.
This
No need to rejoice, but it's
But all I
interesting.
want to remind is that, with everything going on, I would hope
been.
that at the very least, the council, at the minimum, the council needs to approve the continuation of the existing things that we have in place. And I honestly think that if in fact we start to see any problems resulting from the holiday season,
Right.
because the crowds have not gone away.
Thanksgiving and Christmas.
That the council is open, if necessary, to taking further steps. I also wanted to focus, I'm glad that Stephanie made her comments on the parking landscape. She and I both know we're both getting nervous, me more than her, about the landscape firm. And we want this, she's right, we did not do this for the PGA, but at the same time, we want this to look good, and they've got some real hurdles with the irrigation, but we just do not want to be in the situation where we're all of a sudden in April trying to plant.
Mhm.
And I would encourage, Stephanie's working really hard to try to push the contractor, but I hope that if necessary, if it takes some more noise from the council, that y'all can assist in anything she needs to get that contractor moving forward.
Do we have an option with this contractor, or is it our only option is to beat him over the head?
Beat him over the head.
No, getting someone else.
Jumping ship is what it is.
Jumping ship, yeah.
He's got
It's
all
too
the
late.
He's got all the plans.
It's too late, yeah.
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah, I mean, we could, but it's just too late because all.
Right.
That's what I wanted to know, yeah.
It's just
Okay.
too late.
Yeah, and the issue isn't whether he's gonna get it done, the issue is whether he's gonna get it done in time.
Okay.
I think it's good now we have our project manager on top of that.
Yes.
Is he asleep there?
Yeah. And,
Don't worry, it was very complimentary. Totally.
and the last thing I just wanna emphasize is again, on sort of my list of what I hope the next council will, in their first strategy meeting, pick up is we gotta stay on top of the sea level rise. And I think
Yeah, I agree.
I think the groups that have been working this have been doing a great job. We gotta remember though that they're kind of an ad hoc volunteer group, and there's gonna be a point when their enthusiasm is gonna start to get stretched. So I think, you're gonna have to start to think about, how this moves forward in a way that's, again, this is not so urgent. It's not like trying to come up with the COVID vaccine, but at the same time, if we ever get to a point where we just let long periods of time go by that we're not giving attention to this, it's gonna suffer. So I hope that will be on the list. Otherwise, like Chris, I wanna. The staff is not all here. I wish they were, but we are nowhere without the staff. So
True.
I would ask the staff members, the few here, stand up and let me give you a clap. They've made us look good, and they've made it fun.
They sure
so.
do.
Right. So do I see citizens' comments? I can't forget that, one last. Anybody have any citizens' comments on any issues other than what was covered prior to the meeting? All right, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.
Second.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, Bruce.
Now go spray your hands off.